In the Senate chamber at Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., the air was stifling, like the calm before a storm. The hearing on national security, centered around Ukraine aid, was at its peak. Vice President JD Vance, with a calm and steady voice, had just finished his speech on America First policy, emphasizing the priority of national interests. Suddenly, Senator Adam Schiff, known for his composure and sharpness, stood up. His face flushed red, his voice trembling with rising anger. "I'm sorry, but I can't sit here listening to irresponsible words from a jerk like you, Mr. Vice President." The word jerk rang out like a gunshot, silencing the Senate chamber for a moment. But what stunned everyone even more was Vance's unexpected response, which left Schiff completely speechless. The shocking moment quickly spread, creating an unforgettable political earthquake in the capital of Washington, sparking fierce reactions across the country. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The Senate chamber reverberated with the aftershock of Adam Schiff's insult, as if a bomb had just exploded in midair. The word jerk still echoed, leaving senators stunned, reporters scribbling frantically, and the gallery above leaning forward, awaiting the next development. JD Vance, seated at the witness table, was like an oasis of calm amidst the storm. His hands rested gently on the polished wooden table, fingers brushing the edge of a leather portfolio. The room waited, every eye fixed on him, feeling the weight of the moment. Vance leaned forward, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "Senator Schiff," he paused, letting Schiff's name hang in the air. "Are you sure you want to start talking about morality?" The question was like an arrow, precise and intentional. Murmurs spread across the room. Schiff stiffened, his jaw clenched, waving a hand as if swatting a fly. "Don't lecture me, Mr. Vice President," he snapped, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're still wet behind the ears here. You don't understand how Washington works." The gallery buzzed. A few senators shifted uneasily, sensing the atmosphere changing. Schiff, the seasoned lawyer, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his eyes challenging Vance to continue. But Vance didn't flinch. His eyes, steady and cold, locked onto Schiff, seemingly unsettling him. "I understand Washington," Vance said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper, forcing everyone to strain to hear. "I see the deals made in the shadows, the promises broken in broad daylight, and I see your name, Senator, on documents it shouldn't be on." The chamber erupted in murmurs and gasps. Reporters scrambled, pens scratching like a swarm of insects. Schiff's smugness vanished, his eyes narrowed, leaning forward, gripping the table's edge. "What are you implying?" he demanded, his voice sharp but trembling, betraying a hint of unease. Vance didn't answer immediately. He reached for the leather portfolio, opening it slowly, the motion drawing every eye. "I'm not implying," he said, his tone even, almost conversational. "I'm stating the truth. You've taken money from foreign entities through shell companies, Senator, to fund campaigns that divide this country." The accusation was like thunder. Senators exchanged stunned glances, some shaking their heads, others riveted. Schiff paled, his lips moving as if to speak, but no words came. Vance continued, his voice steady but unrelenting. "You've built a career on defending democracy, yet you've taken millions from those who profit from our division. You call me a jerk, but what do you call someone who trades ideals for power?" The hearing room was like a pressure cooker, the air heavy with shock and anticipation. Schiff tried to regain control, slamming his hand on the table. "Outrageous," he roared. "You have no evidence, no standing to make such baseless accusations." His voice cracked, betraying panic. Vance didn't blink. He pulled a sheet of paper from the portfolio, holding it up for the room to see. "No evidence?" he asked, his voice almost gentle but sharper than any shout. "Then explain the email I sent to the Oversight Committee this morning. Explain the wire transfers, the shell company in Delaware, and the voice in the recording, your voice, Senator, discussing discreet contributions with a donor from Brussels." The room descended into chaos. Senators shouted, some demanding order, others demanding explanations. Reporters rushed toward the press gallery, phones already buzzing with breaking news. Schiff's face turned ashen, his hand trembling as he clutched a pen, scribbling meaningless notes to feign composure. "You're fabricating," he muttered, but his words lacked conviction, swallowed by the growing noise. Vance leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanged, as if he'd just commented on the weather. "Fabrication is the game of those with something to hide," he said, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. "I don't hide, Senator. I've seen the ledgers. I've read the memos, and I've seen you stand before the American people, preaching unity, while pocketing funds that sow discord." He paused, letting his words settle like ash after a collapse. "You want to talk about Washington? Let's talk about the cost. Families torn apart, lives lost, all because of your choices." Schiff glanced at his aides, who sat frozen, faces pale. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed stuck in his throat. The hearing room was no longer a place of debate. It was a courtroom, and Vance was both prosecutor and witness. A senator from the back row, a Republican from Texas, leaned forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Mr. Vice President, these are serious allegations. Can you prove them?" Vance nodded, tapping the portfolio lightly. "Every page has been sent to the Ethics Committee. Emails, transfers, even whistleblower testimony. It's all there." The room fell into stunned silence, broken only by the hum of cameras and the rustle of papers. Schiff's chair creaked as he shifted, his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding his colleagues' gazes. The weight of Vance's words pressed down on him, making the once invincible figure appear small, cornered. Reporters in the gallery whispered feverishly, live streams already broadcasting the moment to millions. Adam Schiff, long a model of composure, now sat motionless, eyes wide, his gaze vacant like a man whose mask had just been torn off. Vance's final words about families torn apart and lives lost hung in the air, making the entire room feel the weight of the truth about to be exposed. Vance, with a calm, almost chilling demeanor, opened the leather portfolio before him, each movement deliberate like an artist preparing to perform. He was in no rush, nor did he need to be. "Senator Schiff," he began, his voice low but sharp as a scalpel, "you've received over $20 million from foreign entities through a network of shell companies in Delaware to fund political campaigns that divide America." The accusation was a bombshell, shaking the room. Senators gasped, some whispering to each other, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Schiff, pale as death, gripped the table's edge, his knuckles white. "That's a lie," he shouted, his voice trembling, trying to regain control. But his eyes betrayed him. They were no longer the eyes of a confident man. Vance remained unshaken. He pulled a stack of documents from the portfolio, holding them up to let the light shine through the numbers and signatures. "A lie?" he asked, his voice soft but brimming with challenge. "Then explain these emails, sent to the Oversight Committee this morning. They show you communicating with a fund in Brussels, promising time political influence in exchange for wire transfers. Or explain the bank transactions, from a shell company to divisive campaigns in California and Ohio." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And if that's not enough, I have a recording. Your voice, Senator, discussing undisclosed contributions to secure your seat." The room erupted. Shouts rang out from all sides. Senators stood, some demanding order, others demanding to see the evidence. Reporters jostled in the gallery, phones buzzing with urgent news alerts. Schiff tried to stand tall, his voice faltering as he shouted, "This is a cheap political stunt. I demand to see the evidence immediately." But his words drowned in the noise, and his eyes began to waver like a man realizing he'd walked into a trap. Vance, still seated, tapped his fingers lightly on the portfolio. "The evidence has been sent to the Ethics Committee," he said, his voice even but commanding. "Emails, transfers, recordings, and testimony from a former aide of yours who grew tired of covering up your dirty secrets." The room fell into a deadly silence. Schiff collapsed into his chair, hands covering his face, as if searching for an escape in his mind. Senators exchanged glances, some whispering, others scribbling notes furiously. A CNN reporter standing in the corner whispered into a microphone, "This is an unprecedented moment in Senate history." Cameras captured Schiff, head bowed, and Vance calm as a man who'd just finished a chess match. Schiff's chair, though he still occupied it, suddenly felt empty, like a symbol of his impending downfall. Vance didn't stop. He looked straight at Schiff, his gaze unrelenting. "You've stood before the public preaching about democracy, but let foreign money flow into your pockets funding campaigns that fracture this nation. You call me a jerk? I think you should look in the mirror." The words were a final dagger, slicing through Schiff's remaining defenses. He tried to stand, stumbling, then turned to his aide, signaling to leave. "I won't sit here and listen to slander," Schiff declared, but his voice was weak, almost pleading. He walked out of the room, leaving his chair empty, an image the cameras instantly captured, as if etching his defeat into history. Reporters rushed into the hallway, swarming Schiff, but he only shook his head, lips pursed, saying nothing. Back in the hearing room, Vance remained seated, the portfolio closed, but his eyes suggested the story was far from over. The Democratic senator from the back row stood, voice trembling. "Mr. Vice President, these allegations, are they true?" Vance nodded, his voice calm but certain. "Everything I've said is documented. The papers, the transfers, and the voice in the recording all belong to Mr. Schiff. I didn't come here to play political games. I came to tell the truth." The noise erupted again, but this time it was a mix of excitement and astonishment. Senators began whispering, some shaking their heads, others nodding, as if they'd just witnessed a boxing match end with a knockout. The press started sending urgent reports, headlines flashing on screens. "Vance accuses Schiff of taking foreign money." Vance didn't smile or show triumph. He sat there, hands resting lightly on the portfolio, his gaze sweeping the room like a soldier guarding a flame. Senators began to sense something greater, not just an accusation, but a call for justice. One of Schiff's aides, standing in the corner, furtively texted, face pale, as if knowing a storm was about to hit their boss. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment, and the nation was watching, waiting to see if Schiff would collapse or find a way to fight back. In that moment, the Senate chamber was no longer a place for political debate. It was a stage where truth confronted lies, and Vance, with his chilling calm, had taken control of it. Adam Schiff's empty chair, though he had only just left, became a silent symbol of collapse. Cameras continued to roll, capturing the stunned looks of senators and the anxious glances of aides. JD Vance, still at the witness table, showed no trace of gloating. He closed the leather portfolio, his expression pensive, as if preparing for a moment deeper than the accusations just made. The room, chaotic minutes earlier, now fell into anticipation, as if sensing the story wasn't over. Vance stood, his movements deliberate, pulling a neatly folded letter from his pocket, its edges worn by time. "I want to tell a story," he said, his voice warm, a stark contrast to the sharpness when confronting Schiff. "Not about money or power, but about those forgotten." He held up the letter, the ceiling light shining through, highlighting childish handwriting. "This is from Emma Carter, a 12-year-old girl from Ohio. Her father, an intelligence officer, died in an attack after his identity was exposed, a consequence of campaigns funded by the money Schiff took." The room fell silent. Senators bowed their heads, some touching their chests as if feeling the pain of a stranger's family. Vance opened the letter, his voice soft but clear, reading Emma's words. "I don't know why my dad died, but I want someone to tell the truth, so my mom doesn't cry every night." The girl's words, through Vance's voice, struck like a dagger to the heart. A Democratic senator in the middle row quickly wiped away a tear. Reporters stopped writing. Cameras focused on Vance, capturing the moment. Paused, folding the letter carefully, his gaze lifting to the public gallery. "Sarah Carter, Emma's mother, is here today," he said. Cameras swung to a middle-aged woman, hair tied back, eyes red but resolute. Sarah stood, her voice trembling but strong. "I don't want fame or money," she said. "I just want Emma to know her father didn't die in vain. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for giving us hope." Applause erupted from the gallery, spreading to a few senators, breaking party lines. Vance nodded to Sarah, then returned to the table, pulling out a small object glinting under the lights, a police badge. "This is the badge of Ethan's father, a 10-year-old boy from California," he said, his voice lowering, full of emotion. "His father, a police officer, died in a violent incident caused by defunded security, a result of campaigns backed by dirty money." He gripped the badge tightly, as if it were a promise. "I met Ethan this morning. He gave me this and said, 'Keep it, so my dad isn't forgotten.' I promised him, Ethan, I won't let that happen." The room was swept into a powerful wave of emotion. A Republican senator, eyes red, whispered to a colleague, "I have a grandson Ethan's age." The public gallery broke into sobs, some embracing, sharing collective grief. Reporters, though trying to stay professional, couldn't hide their emotion. An NBC correspondent whispered into a microphone, "This isn't just politics anymore. This is about people." Outside the hearing room, the world was erupting. One user posted, "Vance didn't just expose Schiff. He's fighting for people like Emma." Another post, with a video of Vance reading the letter, racked up millions of views in minutes. "I cried hearing about Ethan. Vance is the leader we need. News channels began live broadcasts, headlines scrolling across screens. Vance tells heartbreaking story of Schiff's fund victims. Vance stood there, his gaze sweeping the room, not as a politician but as a man on a mission. Emma and Ethan aren't the only ones, he said, his voice firm but full of compassion. Thousands of families have lost loved ones because of decisions bought with foreign money. They deserve the truth. They deserve justice. He placed the letter and badge on the table, like a silent vow, then sat down, leaving the room in a heavy silence. In the gallery, Sarah Carter clutched a photo of her husband, tears streaming down her face. A young reporter, Liam Hayes, standing in the corner, quickly filmed the moment, posting it on social media with the caption, "Vance just changed everything. This is the power of truth." The video spread like wildfire, garnering millions of views, comments flooded with emotion. "I stand with Emma and Ethan. Schiff must answer." Posts began appearing from Ohio, Emma's home, and California, Ethan's hometown, with images of people lighting candles in remembrance. In the hearing room, a few senators began to stand, not to debate but to show respect. A Republican from Georgia whispered to a colleague, "I've never seen anything like this." A Democratic senator, loyal to Schiff, bowed his head, as if acknowledging the power of Vance's story. Cameras captured it all. Emma's letter, Ethan's badge, and Vance's pensive face, like symbols of a historic moment. Outside in the hallway, Schiff was still surrounded by reporters, but he was no longer the focus. Questions about the allegations shifted to Emma and Ethan, and Schiff only shook his head, lips pursed, unable to respond. His aides, standing a few steps away, exchanged worried glances, knowing their boss had lost his shine. Meanwhile, Vance remained at the table, his eyes fixed on the gallery where Sarah Carter held hands with a stranger, seeking comfort. The atmosphere in the Senate chamber was no longer a political arena, but a place of remembrance, where the stories of Emma Carter and Ethan echoed, touching every heart. Emma's letter, Ethan's badge, and JD Vance's warm voice had turned the hearing into a moment transcending partisan disputes. Senators, accustomed to dry debates, now sat in silence, many with bowed heads, eyes heavy with sorrow. Cameras kept rolling, capturing the invisible but powerful shift in America's most powerful room. A Democratic senator, Eleanor Brooks from Minnesota, stood, her hands trembling slightly. She cleared her throat, trying to stay composed, but emotion flooded her words. I have a nephew, also Ethan's age," she said, her voice breaking. "He was lost in a violent incident 3 years ago when security budgets were cut. I don't know if it's tied to what the vice president just said, but I know the pain of families like Emma and Ethan." She paused, quickly wiping her eyes, then looked directly at Vance. "Thank you, sir, for reminding us that this work isn't just about laws, it's about people." Her words were like a breeze, sweeping through the rows of senators, dissolving the invisible wall between the parties. A Republican senator from Arizona, known for his toughness, nodded in agreement, gripping the armrest of his chair. Another, a Democrat, whispered to a colleague, "I've never seen the Senate like this." Empathy, rare in this room, began to spread, like ripples on a still lake. Vance stood there, silent, offering only a slight nod to Brooks, his eyes conveying respect. He needed no more words. Emma and Ethan's stories had spoken for him. Cameras captured the moment he held Emma's letter, standing in the chamber with senators behind him, some rising, not to object but to show reverence. The image, Vance, the letter and Schiff's fading shadow, became iconic, broadcast live on news channels. A young Democratic senator from Oregon, a close ally of Schiff, suddenly stood. "I don't know the full truth," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "But if what Mr. Vance says is true, we need an investigation. No one is above justice, not even my friends." The statement was a small thunderclap, startling some Democratic colleagues. A few shook their heads, but none dared refute him. Scattered applause rose from the public gallery, then grew stronger, like an affirmation that truth was prevailing. Reporter Liam Hayes from the corner kept filming, his face alight with excitement. He posted a short clip on social media, capturing Brooks speaking about her nephew and Vance holding the letter, with the caption, "The moment the Senate became human." The video hit 10 million views in its first hour, flooded with comments. "I can't believe Democrats and Republicans are on the same side. Vance did the impossible." News channels from Fox to MSNBC replayed the clip, with commentators calling it the day the Senate found its soul. In the chamber, a typically reserved Republican senator from Texas stood, his voice low but powerful. "I move to adjourn the hearing so the Ethics Committee can review the Vice President's evidence," he said. The motion passed almost immediately, with rare bipartisan agreement. Senators began leaving their seats, but many paused, approaching Vance's table, shaking his hand or simply nodding. One Democrat whispered, "You did the right thing." Vance responded with a nod, his eyes still fixed on the gallery where Sarah Carter sat, clutching her husband's photo. Outside in the hallway, Adam Schiff remained swarmed by reporters, but now he was almost invisible. Questions no longer centered on him but on Emma, Ethan, and what Vance had exposed. Schiff quietly withdrew, his face a portrait of defeat. His aides, standing nearby, exchanged anxious glances, knowing the storm wouldn't stop. Meanwhile, people began sharing personal stories. A mother in Ohio wrote about her son lost to violence. A veteran in California recounted a comrade killed due to underfunded security. These stories, like small flames, merged into a blazing fire, spreading across America. In the chamber, as senators gradually left, Vance remained, Emma's letter in hand. A technician, packing up cables, looked at him, eyes shining. "I have a brother, like Ethan," he said softly. "Thank you, sir." Vance nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder, a simple but meaningful gesture. Liam Hayes's camera captured the moment, and when posted it became iconic. Vance was not just the vice president but a voice for the forgotten. Under the dim glow of a secluded Capitol Hill office, Adam Schiff sat motionless behind a large wooden desk, his face like an unfinished painting, half resolute, half panicked. The storm unleashed by JD Vance still raged outside, through breaking news dominating social media. The noise from the Senate chamber had faded, but the echoes of Emma's letter, Ethan's badge, and the unexpected empathy from senators lingered like daggers piercing Schiff's reputation. He knew he had to act, even as the ground crumbled beneath him. Schiff summoned his advisory team, 3 middle-aged men in black suits and a young woman, hair tightly bunned, swiping swiftly on a tablet. "We need to turn this around," Schiff said, his voice hoarse, eyes scanning the room. "Vance is playing dirty. He's using sob stories to manipulate emotions. We hit the source, his evidence." One advisor with salt and pepper hair nodded, his voice low but cunning. "We can leak that Vance got his info from far-right groups. A few articles, a few posts, and the public will doubt him." The young woman looked up, hesitant. "But what if his documents are real?" Schiff slammed his hand on the desk, making a glass of water tremble. "They're not real, or if they are, they're distorted. I won't let my career end because of some guy from Ohio." A plan was quickly devised, a discreet media campaign, leveraging press contacts to label Vance a purveyor of misinformation. One advisor reached out to a trusted editor at a major newspaper, promising proof that Vance's documents were fabricated. Meanwhile, Schiff recorded a short video, his eyes fixed on the camera, voice low but firm. "I'm under attack by political slander," he said in the video, posted shortly after. "I won't let dirty games play games with the truth." The post garnered thousands of shares from Schiff's supporters, but also faced a wave of criticism. "Explain Emma and Ethan. Where's your evidence, Schiff?" But Schiff's plan quickly cracked from within. A young staffer in his office, Ryan Carter, no relation to Emma or Sarah Carter, had long been quietly disillusioned. Ryan, who once believed in Schiff's ideals, now felt betrayed after reading internal emails confirming Schiff knew about foreign funds. In a decisive moment, Ryan snapped a photo of a message from Schiff to an advisor, instructing them to handle a Delaware transaction in Delaware. He sent the photo to Liam Hayes, the young reporter who captured Vance reading Emma's letter. Hayes, without hesitation, posted the message with a caption, "Schiff knew about the foreign money. This is the truth from his own office." The post spread like wildfire, reaching millions of views, shattering the Schiff's counterattack effort. In the office, Schiff received word of the leak, his face freezing like stone. "Who?" he roared, slamming his hand on the table. His aides exchanged glances, none daring to respond. The young woman checked her tablet, her face paling. "A message from Ryan. He quit an hour ago." Schiff sank into his chair, his eyes vacant, as if all energy had been drained. He realized he'd been defeated not only by Vance's accusations, but also by his own team's betrayal. His counterattack video now became a mockery, with comments like, "Wow, Schiff, liar. Explain the message. You're out of moves." Outside, public outrage intensified. Posts shifted from criticism to demands for justice. A mother in California wrote, "My child died because of violence, and Schiff took money from those who caused it." A veteran in Ohio posted a video, holding up a military badge saying, "Vance stands with us. Schiff stands with money." News channels began covering the leak, with Schiff's text message replayed on screens. CNN called it a fatal blow to Schiff's career, while Fox emphasized, "Vance was right all along." In the Senate chamber, though adjourned, a few senators lingered, discussing heatedly. A Democrat who once supported Schiff shook his head, saying to a colleague, "If that text is real, he's done." A Republican senator nodded. "Vance doesn't just have evidence, he has the heart of the people." On social media, Liam Hayes continued posting updates, including a photo of Vance leaving the chamber, holding Emma's letter. One post read, "Vance didn't just expose Schiff, he gave us a reason to believe." Comments flooded in. "Thank you, Liam. Protect Emma and Ethan." Schiff in his office watched the news on TV, his face like a wax statue. The salt and pepper-haired advisor tried to console him. "We can sue for the leak." But Schiff only shook his head, his voice weary. "No one cares about lawsuits anymore. They care about Emma, Ethan, and that damn text." He stood, looking out the window at the crowd of reporters gathered outside. He knew he couldn't leave without facing unanswerable questions. Meanwhile, in Ohio, a group of residents began gathering outside Emma Carter's home, bringing candles and flowers to show support. A school in California displayed a photo of Ethan's father's badge, with the words, "We remember." These small but powerful acts, shared widely, added pressure on Schiff. He had tried to fight back, but each step only sank him deeper into the quagmire. In the days following the Senate hearing, Washington, D.C. was steeped in an unusual atmosphere, as if the entire city held its breath, awaiting justice. The story of JD Vance, Emma Carter's letter, Ethan's badge, and the leaked text from Adam Schiff's office had transcended the halls of power, spreading across America. Schiff, once a Democratic icon, had become the focal point of outrage, while Vance, with his steadfast resolve, had ignited faith in something rare, the truth. The Senate Ethics Committee acted swiftly, convening a closed meeting to review Vance's evidence. The documents, emails, bank transfers, and a recording of Schiff's voice discussing with a foreign donor were meticulously analyzed. The leaked text from Ryan Carter, Schiff's former staffer, was the decisive blow, confirming Schiff knew about funds funneled through a Delaware shell company. Within a week, the committee released its findings. Schiff had violated campaign finance laws and abused his authority. A special Senate session was held, solemn but tense to vote on his fate. In the chamber, senators sat upright, their gazes a mix of resolve and regret. Schiff, in a gray suit, his face gaunt, sat in the back row, avoiding colleagues' eyes. The presiding officer struck the gavel, announcing, "We vote on the resolution to censure and suspend Senator Adam Schiff." The results came swiftly, 85 in favor, 15 against. Murmurs spread through the room as Schiff bowed his head, hands gripping his chair, as if clinging to the last scraps of his dignity. He said nothing, quietly leaving the room, his figure shrinking in the hallway, engulfed by a swarm of reporters. But the story didn't end there. Vance, from the witness table, stood, his voice carrying a different strength, not to accuse but to heal. "We're not here to destroy a man," he said, his eyes sweeping over the senators. "We're here to rebuild trust, for people like Emma and Ethan, for families who've lost too much." He proposed a resolution called for the fallen and forgotten, calling for a thorough investigation into deaths linked to security cuts tied to illicit funds. The resolution, with unexpected bipartisan support, passed 100-0, a rare moment of unity. Applause erupted, not just from senators but from the public gallery, where Sarah Carter sat, clutching her husband's photo. Outside the chamber, America was stirring. People shared news of the resolution, with posts like, "Vance didn't just expose Schiff, he's changing the system." A video from Liam Hayes, capturing Vance's speech on the resolution, garnered millions of views, with comments flooding in. "This is politics for the people. Thank you for Emma and Ethan." Schools in Ohio began displaying banners reading, "For the fallen and forgotten," while in California, a group of veterans held a memorial for Ethan's father, raising his police badge high. Vance didn't stop at words. He left Capitol Hill, taking a flight to a Virginia hospital where James Carter, an officer injured in a violence incident linked to security cuts, was recovering. In the hospital room, Vance sat beside James, listening to his story, a father who once thought he wouldn't survive to see his daughter again. Vance handed him a letter from Emma, which read, "I pray for you." James, eyes red, gripped Vance's hand. "You did what no one else dared," he said. The moment, captured by a nurse and posted online, became a symbol of courage and connection. The next day, Vance visited Arlington National Cemetery, where Officer Daniel Reed, another victim of the violence, rested. Under a gray sky, he knelt by the grave, placing Emma's letter and Ethan's badge on the headstone. "We won't forget," he whispered, his voice soft but resolute. A group of veterans, present by chance, stood in silence, saluting in military fashion. The image, snapped by a passerby and shared online, spread worldwide, captioned, "Vance doesn't just talk, he acts." Comments below read, "This is true leadership." In Ohio, residents painted a large mural depicting voters standing between Emma and Sarah Carter, with the words "For the fallen and forgotten." In California, a school held a memorial event, inviting Sarah Carter to share her husband's story. These small acts, though modest, sparked a movement. People nationwide began sharing the names of loved ones they'd lost. A mother in Texas wrote, "My son, lost in last year's violence last year, was named Michael. Please remember him. He was a hero." A veteran in Florida posted, "My comrade John deserves justice." These names, like stones, built an invisible memorial. On television, commentators debated Schiff's campaign legacy and Vance's influence. Some called it a turning point for political transparency, while others emphasized Vance has awakened a nation. But for the public, it wasn't analysis that mattered. It was the feeling that someone was listening. A teacher in Ohio had students write thank you letters to Vance, one reading, "I want to grow up like you, protecting people like Emma." These letters, sent to Vance's office, became a source of motivation for him. Schiff, meanwhile, had nearly vanished from the spotlight. A brief Washington Post article reported he'd hired a lawyer to handle the investigation, but the public no longer cared. His name, once tied to democracy, was now overshadowed by names like Emma, Ethan, James, and Daniel. When he returned to the chamber, Washington, he stood before a mirror in his office, looking into his own eyes. He didn't see a politician, but a man with a burden. Emma's letter and Ethan's letter, now kept in a desk drawer, served as reminders of why he fought. Outside the window, the Capitol glowed, but for the first time in years, it carried a sense of hope. Justice, though imperfect, had been served, not just for Emma and Ethan, but for thousands of nameless people finally remembered. Morning sunlight filtered through the rose branches in the White House rose garden, where JD Vance stood before a small but dignified crowd. Behind him, the American flag fluttered gently in the breeze, a reminder of the responsibility he bore. The Senate hearing, with Adam Schiff's empty chair and the For the Fallen and Forgotten resolution, had become part of history, but the story wasn't over. In Vance's hands, Emma Carter's letter and Ethan's badge rested side by side, like two small flames illuminating his mission. Today he was not just the vice president, but a figure inspiring a nation rediscovering its faith. He began his speech, his voice low but vibrant. "We've walked a painful journey," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. There was Sarah Carter, Emma's mother, standing beside the 12-year-old girl with shining eyes, Ethan clutching his mother's hand, and another woman, the wife of Officer James Carter, who was recovering in the hospital. But from pain, we find purpose. Emma, Ethan, and thousands of others remind us that leadership isn't about power, it's about responsibility. The crowd was silent, save for the chirping of birds and the soft hum of cameras. A CNN reporter in the back row scribbled furiously, sensing the weight of the moment. Across America, Vance's legacy was taking shape. A short documentary by Liam Hayes, chronicling the journey from the hearing to the resolution, had reached 30 million views on YouTube. Viewers, from students in Ohio to workers in California, left comments. "Vance gives me a reason to believe in politics. Remember Daniel Reed, our hero." Schools began holding memorial events, displaying photos of Vance holding Emma's letter, with "For the Fallen and Forgotten" etched on wooden plaques. A veterans group in Texas launched a fundraising campaign to support families of fallen officers, inspired by Ethan's story. In the Rose Garden, Vance turned to Emma, handing her back her letter. "You gave me strength," he said, kneeling to meet her eyes. Emma smiled, for the first time since her father's death, and hugged him. Ethan, standing nearby, touched his father's badge, now pinned to Vance's jacket. "I believe you'll keep your promise," the boy said, his voice small but certain. The crowd applauded, not loudly but deeply, as if affirming that people like Emma and Ethan would not be forgotten. Farther away, at Arlington National Cemetery, a group of students placed flowers by Officer Daniel Reed's grave, where Vance had left the letter and badge. A girl, holding a sign reading "We Remember," took a photo and posted it. The post garnered thousands of shares, with people from across the country writing the names of loved ones lost. Mary, my mother, killed in last year's violence. Tom, my brother, an officer. These names, once buried in grief, were now cherished like precious gems. On television, commentators called Vance the awakener of the nation's conscience. A New York Times editorial wrote, "Vance didn't just expose a scandal, he ignited a movement." President Trump, in a brief speech, praised Vance. He embodies America first, not in words but in actions. But to the public, Vance was more than a politician. A plumber in Ohio posted, "I don't care about parties. Vance stands up for people like me, like Emma." A teacher in California had students write thank you letters to Vance. One reading, "I want to be like you, protecting the vulnerable." As the Rose Garden ceremony ended, Vance stepped into the Senate chamber, now quiet after the storm. A janitor, Clara Evans, mopping the floor, looked up at him. "I watched your speech," she said, her voice trembling. "My husband, an officer, died because of security budget cuts. Thank you for giving us a voice." Vance paused, placing a hand on her shoulder, his eyes sincere. "Clara, I promise to keep fighting for your husband and others." The moment, captured by another staffer and posted, went viral with the caption, "Vance listens, even when the cameras are off." Vance stood alone in the Senate chamber, his gaze fixed on Schiff's empty chair, now a symbol of justice. He opened a drawer, took out Emma's letter and Ethan's badge, and placed them before him as a reminder. Outside, America was changing, not through grand laws but through small acts. A candle lit in Ohio, a mural in California, a name shared. Vance knew justice wasn't just suspending Schiff. It was restoring faith for people like Clara, Emma, and Ethan. He stepped out of the chamber, light from the hallway illuminating his face, carrying hope. On YouTube, Vance closed the story with a call. Like, subscribe, and share the name of someone who needs to be remembered. "This isn't my victory, it's ours." Liam Hayes' final post, showing Vance holding hands with Emma and Ethan, read, "Say their names, Emma, Ethan, Daniel, and thousands more." Comments flooded in. "I remember my sister Laura, my dad Henry, a hero." As night fell over Washington, the lights on Capitol Hill still glowed, but now they carried a new meaning. Vance, with Emma's letter and Ethan's badge in hand, had ignited a flame that not only illuminated America, but also inspired the world, a legacy of hope built on truth and courage. The story of JD Vance confronting Adam Schiff in the Senate hearing reflects profound issues in American society today: the loss of trust in politics, the gap between leaders and the people, and the thirst for justice. Emma Carter's letter, Ethan's badge, and the "For the Fallen and Forgotten" resolution are not just dramatic details, but symbols of the real pain felt by American families, those who suffered losses from opaque political decisions, like security budget cuts or illicit funding. Vance's actions, from exposing the truth to kneeling at Officer Daniel Reed's grave, demonstrate the power of sincerity and responsibility. Conversely, Schiff's downfall, with the leaked text from Ryan Carter, serves as a reminder that deceit, no matter how cleverly concealed, will eventually be exposed. The lesson from this story is this: in a polarized society like America today, every individual can spark change by standing firm in truth and empathizing with others. Learn from Vance. Listen to stories like Emma's and Ethan's, however small, and act for the common good, as he did in proposing a resolution that united both parties. Don't let cynicism stop you from speaking out, as Ryan did when leaking the text, despite the risks. In life, share your own letters and badges, your personal stories through social media or in your community, to connect and inspire, as Liam Hayes did with his million-view video. Justice doesn't come from grand speeches but from small, courageous acts, like Clara Evans sharing about her husband. Live authentically, and remember that, like Vance, you can ignite hope for an entire community. Thank you for joining the story of Emma, Ethan, and the journey for justice. Please hit subscribe to keep spreading the truth, and join us for the next video.